So now let's talk about the colleges. And this is a subject which is very dear to my heart, um, principally because I think the top 100 schools in the country are completely running a scam. And I say it in a very respectful manner. The schools, typically, I'm not talking the public schools, I'm talking really private schools, the top 50 private schools, which give no zero merit scholarships, and they charge you close to $300,000 or more for an admission in a school. I hate those schools with a vengeance because I definitely don't think an undergrad degree is worth that kind of money. Okay, I mean, I'm ready to throw in 150K, but that's really where I draw the line, and I have a whole mathematical formula around the ROI around it, but that's where I lay my stake. So let's show you what these colleges are about and how they stack up to one another. Okay? So when you look at colleges, what's really key is to understand your fit. Okay, does a college fit? Is this personality like who you are? And we'll talk more about that. The different types of schools, like liberal arts colleges, vocational colleges, or colleges and universities. We'll talk about research universities. There are several other forms of master's universities. We'll talk about those too. What are the costs, and what is merit scholarship versus financial aid? Okay. So there are over 400,000 of 4,000 universities in America. Okay, you probably have heard of the names of only these 8, which I've shown over here. These are the good universities, and they are doing really well. And you see all the universities on the coasts, most of them do really well. And that's mostly because students love going to the coasts. They want to stay either on the coast, west coast, east coast, or maybe a couple of them will go down to Texas. Okay, but or a few of them will go to Texas. But nobody wants to be in the Midwest or even Northeast area, Northwest. None of these areas. People don't want to go there. So that's where a lot of bargain colleges come in. And people don't want to go there, not because the college is not good. They just don't feel it's a cool location. And I'm here to tell you that those are some of the best locations to look at colleges, because people are a lot more down to earth. Now they're not spending money through the wazoo. They are more relaxed. People are chilled out. The professors are chilled out over there. Good schools in the coast, but the cost you pay is way too much. Out of these 4,000 universities, 2,000 of them will not even fill up a classroom, okay, every year. And they're pretty darn good, these schools. They're not something which are to be thrown away or not to be considered at all. Most of the reason these schools make it in this list is because they do a lot of marketing. And of course, over time, they've picked up some of the best professors and the best student cohorts. But I would argue at an undergraduate level, do you really even need the best professors or the best cohort around you? Not really. This man, Michael Gladwell, is one of the most prolific writers in this country. And his quote here really caught my attention. In fact, this YouTube video, try to look up Malcolm Gladwell and prestigious institutions, or don't go to Harvard. And it's a 9-minute YouTube video. He talks about how a third of the class at Harvard drops out of CS and engineering and math every year. And think of it, these schools get the best of the best. Everybody's an A grader in these schools. But when you are a class of all A graders, you don't know where to go. A third of the class has a massive identity crisis, and they just leave that major. Think of leaving a CS major and moving to something non-CS. What are identity crises you go through? I mean, you're giving up a lucrative career because you went to one of those colleges which was just picking up students like that. Okay, so do not be stuck to these institutions. These institutions don't make you. Those were the days of the past when those big boys connections mattered. It's not what it is now. This is the list of the gold digger schools, I would call them, in this country. Okay. My daughter went to one of these, Wellesley College. This is a school which Hillary Clinton went to, and It's the sister college of MIT. And I was ecstatic, super happy when I got admission for Shreya in the school. But they gave me nothing, no scholarships. And my daughter was bright like anything. But then I realized later that these schools, they don't give any merit scholarship, nothing. So they will not discount the institutions at all. So that's a problem. And Harvard, Stanford, MIT, all of them come in this list. So if you're ready to pay 300K and over, like it's more like 320K now, go for it. You might get, if you get into these schools, I just chuckle when I see people throwing parties and, they have this merit of badge on their hand saying, my child goes to Yale, which I feel like, sure, good for you, but it's not what people think it is. There are as many depressed people in colleges in these schools, perhaps more in these schools than you find in more level-headed schools. And that's the decision everybody has to make for themselves. You can find value schools in a lot of places. And the cost difference between a public university versus a private is massive. And this is data from 2021. Some of these data is already actually out of date because the tuition prices, new prices have already come out. But just in California, the state schools are amazing. The polytechnics are amazing. This list in 2018 of schools costing less than $20,000 a year became very prevalent. But we don't talk much about these things. These schools here, they pay the most. Okay? The value that you get of the payoff of what you do. Like University of Houston, you probably never heard of it. Maritime Academy. These are not very expensive schools. Let's take UWash Bothell, it's not as expensive. Baruch College is definitely not very expensive. Michigan Technological University. So it's worth looking into universities, especially if you don't know the names. What people usually do is when they look at lists, they look for familiar names. And I'm telling you, look at the not as familiar names. And I have for my students, my college counseling business students, I have a portal where they can very easily see the data that they need to look at. And I train them on the whole process. So in less than 3 or 4 minutes, they can make a decision if the school is a place I want to investigate more in time or into or not. Okay? This could be a decision that could make a huge difference to your career. Going to a liberal arts school is pretty much going to an Ivy League school. You could argue that Ivy League institutions are typically liberal arts colleges with a very good STEM programs on them. Over the last 10, 15 years, the line has been blurring. The liberal arts colleges have been providing more STEM programs and universities are providing more humanities programs. But what the key concept or what differentiates them still stays, which is colleges only cater to undergraduates. Universities cater to a lot more people, which means your child is, or you are fighting for the attention of the professor, the recruiters, with a lot more people here versus here. The classroom sizes are much smaller in colleges, which means you could be in the face with the professor. Like I know Shreya, my older one, would go for breakfast at the professors' homes. The professors lived on campus and they are so involved with each other. They know each other so well that I actually had a chance to even walk in and watch one of the classrooms where they were teaching, the teacher and the students. They literally were standing like 2 feet apart, okay? Like 6 students and the teacher in between, and they're all literally on top of each other. So it's pretty comical what you see in a small school, how professors and teachers and students are in a very intense relationship. Whereas in a bigger university, you do have larger classroom sizes, TAs managing the class. So which is okay. It's not for people, for students who are a hustler mindset, like large places, it's okay. But there are some students who like to be in a suburbia, smaller places. They do want to have access to a downtown, but they don't want the hustle. They want a focused small place. So think about that. There are a lot more specialized programs that colleges can offer training, whereas there's a lot more research opportunities in universities. Majority of the colleges are private and universities are public. So that does change. The funding matters a lot, and for research, so that is the case. These are some of the very best colleges. Pomona is here as well, which is in California. Swarthmore is in Pennsylvania. Amherst is in Massachusetts. Wellesley is Massachusetts. I think Williams is somewhere in New York, or it's in the Northeast. I forget where though. Now let's look at what are honors programs, which are really a liberal arts type-ish college within a university. So for example, you could get admitted in Penn State, okay? And Penn State is not a very expensive school to go to. And if you got into the Schreyer, whatever they call it, honors program, that's very coveted. That's like getting a Ivy League education for the cost of paying for a public school. So you don't pay any extra for going to an honors college, which is within the public school. You just have to fight for it. You have to make an essay, an additional case for it. So apply to schools like Penn State, Florida Atlantic, CUNY, College Honors College. Barrett is a very good program, in Arizona State program. So these are very, very good programs to look into, even if UC Irvine has a good program for that. So with that, I guess I'm still going to keep recording it because I'm still just recording this session. I'll take questions at the end of the session, but if you have any questions on these points, again, just shoot a note to me and we can talk about it. Now let's talk about what the selection criteria is when we select colleges, we make them part of our list. We already talked a little bit about the selection criteria when we explained when we walked in, we talked about the colleges, the university, and honors program. So we're on value schools. We're already talking about it. But now let's talk about selection criteria. How do you decide if a school is good for you? Okay. Now I have a 12-point designer program to really think it through and give it a very statistical value. So many of my students will come in with 50 programs, 50 schools that they like. And I make them go through understanding what matters to them. Like they actually give these dimensions a value that this is most important. So this box will become much bigger, this circle, or maybe the academic environment should be bigger. That becomes bigger. And then they'll go through a rating of, so they'll put the dimensions, the rating of how the value for each of the dimensions. And then they'll actually go and rate each of the schools based on that. And then we come up with a score based on that. And it's pretty easy then to figure out which schools you want to apply to. Okay. What's really important is to understand you will spend less than 10 hours in a class every week. But you will spend another 160 hours, 158 hours to be more specific, outside with colleagues, with professors, with the ecosystem, with the neighborhood. So the location, the kind of atmosphere in the school, the settings, the cost, how far is it from home, what's the size, everything really, really matters. So think a lot about the colleges. The unfortunate thing is most of us look at US News and we make our decision about that. When we say, okay, do I want to go to the college? The first thing that comes to our minds is, what's the rating? How many % people got in? And almost anything over 25%, most people think it's like, I don't want to even touch it kind of thing. And it is such an unfortunate marketing debacle or marketing genius that has worked in the system that it's hard to get over that. So the choice is yours. If you want to get over it and you want to actually have a productive lifestyle and enjoy school, talk to me later and I'll give you some of my perspectives. So if you're applying to about 20 schools, I consider for the first, for one, UCs as just one school with one application. So thinking about like 20 applications. For your dream and reach school, you probably will have more like 4, maybe 5. Your target should be a good 6, 7, more like 8. And then the safety schools should be the remaining percentage. So that's kind of how I divide them. Most students will have a lot in safety and a lot in dream. And what happens is they don't end up getting the dreams. They get into a lot of safeties and they're like, oh, this school, I didn't really want to go over there anyways. And that really freaks me out as a counselor, because they work their tails off with me. I invest my time with them. And they shamelessly come and say, oh, I never really intended to go there. So it's like, if you never intended to go there, why was it even there on the list? I mean, 1 or 2 spare tires is okay, but to have like 5, 6, you should have something in a safety which you're like, okay, I'm definitely taking one of those if I get one of those, okay? Over here, same, but you're like, chances are a little low for me to get in, okay? And then dream schools. So think, try at least at a very high level, try to apply to the dream schools and your more than half of your targets all by early action. So if you don't get into your target and dream schools, then you at least have half of your targets and maybe a couple of your dreams and safety schools to apply to in the regular cycle. A lot of people come and ask me about early decision, early action. I mean, rolling admissions is not very common, but there's still schools like Arizona State University have that. Most public schools do not have an early action or early decision. They only have regular decision. But the good private schools will have early action and early decision. Some very good schools will actually not provide early action at all. They'll either provide restricted early action or they'll get rid of early action altogether. So they are trying to just get people who are committed, because this commitment is binding. Early action is not binding. Restrictive early action is, in my humble opinion, a scam. 5 or 6 schools come together and say, if you apply to our institution, you cannot early action anywhere else. And that is just, I don't even understand why that is there. I mean, why could they not just do an early decision? Because early decision is committed binding. So they could have made it easily the binding decision, but they just decide to go their own way. And there are enough of our students who fall for this mess. Stanford is one of these, Yale, Princeton. It's horrible, this system, but whatever. But yeah, I am a fan of early decision, especially if you fall in love with the school. Early action, big fan of it. Try to get as many early actions as you can. 15th October onwards, the cycle starts for admissions. I think Georgia Tech is the first one. Just apply as many you can early actions over there. But make sure those colleges are on the list that you're going to apply to. So that concludes that section.